Good evening. Am I audible?
आप जानते नहीं आपने मुझ पे कितना बड़ा एहसान किया
Good evening, Dr. Shakar.
Good evening, Dr. Thakur.
Uh, so we'll just start in a while.
Yes, yes, no problem. Start at your convenience.
So, welcome everyone, and we formally start yet another session of this Idea to Impact series. And we are really honored to have Professor 𝗜𝗺𝗱𝗶𝗀𝗀 with us today to speak on the recent labor uh, law, the labor codes that are there. Now, why I said fortunate? Because if you just browse his LinkedIn profile or his social media profile, you would understand and probably agree with me that Professor Sarkar needs no introduction, especially when it comes to issues like labor. He is currently a professor of general management and economics area chair at the Goa Institute of Management, Goa. Uh, and also, he is also attached with the Vinaya Commission School of Economics and Public Policy in the capacity of a visiting professor. And we expect his expertise in due time. Professor Sharkar was the Joint Labor Commissioner of the government of West Bengal for full time and for almost uh, more than 20 years. So he has been operational in establishing a lot of labor laws, enacting a lot of labor laws, implementing a lot of labor laws in the state of West Bengal for many years. Professor Sarkar was also a fellow with the 𝗜𝗺𝗽𝗰 National Labour Institute, Noida, and of course, he has done his uh, doctoral studies at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. In that way, we are alma maters. So, so today, without any further delay, I would formally welcome Professor Sarkar once again on behalf of the Vinaya Mission School of Economics and Public Policy, and of course the Vinaya Mission Research Foundation deemed to be university. And we will try to make it more of a dialogue session rather than a monologue. So, but before that, over to Professor Sarkar to initiate the discussion as he feels appropriate. Over to Professor Sarkar.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm very happy to be in this space. And thanks, Dr. Devdulal, for such a kind introduction. I'm very happy to contribute to this Impact to Idea series of 𝗜𝗺𝗱𝗶𝗶. Before me, very renowned policymakers and academics were part of this series. So very privileged to be part of this series. Hopefully, I am audible perfectly, no?
Yes, you are. You are.
So today we would be talking about, this discussion is all about India's new labor codes. This new labor code was formulated and became law 5 years back. So last 5 years, for reasons not explained, these laws were on hold. Means it was passed, it was placed in the parliament, then passed. Then these laws got presidential assent also. But however, these laws were not implemented. The implementation date, as notified by the Ministry of Labor and Employment, was 21st November 2025. Now, in January, they also have come out with the draft rules, because for implementation of Act, you need the rules also. So, central labor being in the concurrent list, the state governments will making its own laws, own rules, but they are for those establishment for which central government is the appropriate government, for those central rules would prevail. So central government has come out with the rules, like draft rules, and they put it in the public domain, and they have sought feedback from people in general. Any person has any issues can write to the Ministry of Labor and Employment, stating their grievances. So after a point, after 45 days, this would be formally, finally notified. So you can say, and there are states are also doing the same process, following the same process. Maybe by April 1, all the new laws would be in full-fledged implementation stage, kind of a thing. Maybe another 2-3 months, even though formally it is already being implemented. But you need the rules to actually implement the laws. Now,
I have a question here. Sorry
yes.
to interrupt in between, Professor Sarkar. We talking about the labor laws, the labor codes, etc. But even before we talk about the new labor codes, if you can briefly highlight for our audience that what structural problems in India and India's pre-2020 labor law regime prompted the consolidation into these 4 labor codes. So, if you can just briefly touch on this particular point, so it will be easier for us
I
to
give
relate.
you the context of formulation of labor codes. So this labor code formulation is part of labor reform, and we are hearing about labor reform for last 2 decades. Like it started in late 90s. Suppose India initiated the liberalization, globalization, and privatization of the economy. As all of you know, that it started around July 1991. So then the growth rate was quite good during 95 to 97, that 98, that later part of the 90s. And that period of time, people feel that we should also have labor reform. So that it is part of the second generation reform. So the question is, what is actually labor reform? Labor reform There are two parts of it. One is part of the laws to be changed, and another is that there is a administration part of the laws also. So, labor code formulation is part of that labor law changes that is required. However, administrative reforms that kept on happening for last 3 decades, like that's a continuous process that we have seen. It started with UP and other states followed thereafter. So the administrative process, because how the law is to be implemented, there is also administrative part of it. I'll come to that later. So that part started long back. So if you see the labor law, why that this reform, if you look, reform is something which is, I would say, this labor code formulation part started around 2016-17. Before that, state governments, they were doing amendments to the existing laws. Now, these existing laws, mostly if we look at our labor law framework, it when we got independence in 1947, most of the laws came at that point of time. Most of the labor laws that is implemented till few days back were enacted or formulated around that time. Some of the laws are pre-independence laws also, like Trade Union Act, that is a pre-independent law. Employees Compensation Act, that is also pre-independence. Payment of Wages Act, that is also pre-independence. Even the law which is also known as mother of all labor laws, Industrial Dispute Act 1947, it was actually July 47. So in that sense, it is pre-independence. So immediately after independence, we got Factories Act and many other important EPF Act, ESIC Act, Minimum Wages Act. This came between 48 to 52 during that period. Throughout 1950s, we have other laws came up one after one. Even that this trend continued till continued in the 60s also. The pace of enacting new laws got bit arrested in 1970s. 1970s, we have few important laws coming up, like Gratuity Act 1972, then Equal Remuneration Act, which talks about equal remuneration for men and women, which may seem very simplistic, but even now the women get 25% less to wages than men. That is what the data show. The law came in 1976. Then Migrant Workers Act came in 1979. In 1980s, the act came that the law came that was a Child Labor Act. And in 1996, then came Building and Other Construction Workers Act, and in 2008, the Unorganized Sector Workers Welfare Act. So broadly speaking, you can see the most of our labor laws were enacted in late 40s, 50s, 60s. Then 70s, 80s, 90s also some of the laws were added. Now, but there has been sea changes in the labor market during that period. So the laws that were formulated in 40s, 50s, and 60s, those laws lost some of its relevance because the labor market characteristics changed a lot. So the need for reform emerged from two things. One thing is that some of the laws are no longer catering to the present labor market realities. Like present labor market is quite different from the labor market that was there in 1940s, 50s, 60s. That is one thing. So you need to make it relevant to the present context. This is the one reason why you need labor reform. Another is that there are too many laws also. So what happened that over the time, as and when the like trade union lawmakers, they felt that you need to protect certain part of your labor force, they have come out with laws. So you have so many laws came up. So suppose in central government alone has enacted 44 labor laws. So it is sometimes confusing for workers also, for employers also. They have to submit so
44
many
labor laws.
44 labor laws. So it is like if you add the state laws, then it would be more than 200. If you because state also maybe all the states together would be another 200. So it is a bit confusing. Suppose when I joined as a labor administrator, like in late 90s, we also find suppose for wages there are four kinds of law. like wage related laws, social security, there are multiple laws. So sometimes a worker also is not able to understand which laws actually apply for that particular issue. So it is a bit confusing. And another problem is that there are too many returns and reports to be filed under each of the laws. So if a establishment tries to follow the laws or comply with the laws, it has to maybe filing 70 80 returns reports in a year, which is a cumbersome and time consuming and something you can avoid. Replication of same thing in one report, another report. So those are the things. So there are two reasons. So you need to consolidate these laws into broad categories to make it more simplistic, more user friendly. So this is one thing. Another is that to make it more relevant for the labor market changes that has happened over the years. So these are the two things. That is why the talk of labor reform was in kind of circulation since 1990s, that we need to look at our labor laws and we need to do some changes in the labor laws. However, the direction of change, where the laws would be, how the laws would be changed, with respect to that, there were difference of opinions. The employer's opinion was something else.
Exactly. Here I
Trade
have
union opinion
one
was something
question.
else.
Here exactly I have one question when you talk about these. Just for my clarity, in case when
Yes,
you
yes.
discuss, if you can bring in, can is there anything like that when you talk about these labor codes and its usability, etc. Does it reflect somewhere kind of a right-based approach to a more flexible and compliance framework, kind of something? Is there something like that when you talk about its implementation? I mean,
Exactly.
balance, worker protection, ease of doing business, something, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And that is why I'm coming to that only.
That's there.
That
Yeah, that's there.
uh, pre-liberalized India, post 1991, the focus
Hmm,
was on growth and focus was
hmm,
on having a flexible labor market. Here,
hmm,
I would
hmm.
like to spend 1 minute or so. What is this flexibility is all about? This
Correct.
flexibility is about the choice before the employers to engage labor force as and when they kind of deem it fit with respect to the changes that is happening in the market. So means that suppose you are running an establishment today, you need 100 workers. Tomorrow it may happen that the market, because of market fluctuation, you need less workers, 90 workers. So you want the flexibility that today if I have 100 workers, tomorrow I may deploy 90 workers, maybe day after tomorrow I need 110 workers. So they wanted this flexibility that if I want to get rid of workers on a particular day or for a particular period, I should have the freedom to do that. That was basically the labor market flexibility. Labor law, on the contrary, put some restriction on this uh, like disengagement of labor. Once you take a labor, you just cannot disengage them just like that, because labor, as per the labor law, is part of human rights also. And labor, even though in economics term, so it is part of the production function, like it's an input in the production function, but it is quite different from the other inputs in the sense that other inputs are non-living inputs, labor is a living inputs. So labor has to be treated differently. So that is why labor laws are there. Suppose in a production function you have 5 units, one is labor, there are 4 other units. There there is no protection in that sense for the other 4 units, but for labor, because they are living things. So when people work, their labor power get depreciated. You need to give that labor uh, food and rest so that in the next morning he or she comes back for work. So that has to be ensured. Otherwise, we need to go back to Ricardo's iron law of wages, where people used to die, and then again, life and death that regulated the labor market. But in a democratic society, we just cannot let people die just like that. So you need to have labor laws. So labor laws by default are rights giving legislations. Like it is giving certain rights, it is giving protection. It is about rights and protection. So these rights and protections are in conflict with the labor market flexibility that employers wanted. That is where the conflict is. So that is where the content of labor reform, as per the employers and as per the trade unions, differ from each other. So employers want more flexibility, and also because since 1991 or late 1980s, India is kind of more focused on GDP growth or export orientation. And because of this, they want to produce at the least cost of production. And so, but producers, if you look at the production function, other inputs price, producers mostly have no control. Land, energy, those prices are almost given. So only one input they can control the production cost is labor. So there has been a competition among the states also to project states as a kind of place. You come, we have cheap labor, and you use the cheap labor. Your cost of production would be lower. Your if your cost is lower, you will make greater profit. So this profit maximization, minimization of cost through labor cost minimization, that is what driven all the states, all these business summit that happened during this time of the year in different states. That it is like that. Come, we have cheap labor. We would be giving 3 years of labor law holidays. That kind of incentives are given for the investors to come and invest. That is applicable for domestic investors. That is applicable for foreign investors also. So here, and also we another reality we need to kind of keep in mind is that our labor market. So if you look at India's labor market, there is huge excess supply of labor. How this is, why this is huge excess supply of labor, which is translating into huge reserve army of labor force, is that if you look our sectoral composition of our GDP, means first we look at the GDP sectoral composition. Only 14% of the GDP comes from agriculture, 25% come from secondary sector, and rest 61% comes from uh, service sector. This is the GDP segregation. However, if you look at the occupational distribution, 45% of the labor force is still tied to agriculture, and only 70 to 80% are tied to secondaries, and rest is in the service sector. So even though agriculture is having only 14% share in the GDP, it is having 45% share of the labor force. So agriculture has more than 3 times workforce that it ought to have. The reason is that people try to move out of agriculture, like a classic Louisian framework, that surplus labor from agriculture to be absorbed in the manufacturing and the service sector. But
Yes.
that in India, that is at the best partial. This surplus labor from agriculture is not getting meaningfully absorbed in the manufacturing particularly. So we also have a very lopsided service sector growth. You
So
see
are you
all
trying to
in
say that there is a linkage problem? I mean, between the two sectors. I mean, the forward backward linkage kind of thing. Are you trying to
I think this is a
you know?
structural issue that Indian economy faces with respect to the labor. So
Hmm.
you see this 45%, this 2/3 of the labor force in agriculture are actually redundant labor. Means what we know in the textbook format, disguised unemployment or underemployment. What?
Yes.
Now these people, they come to the nearby urban centers in hordes. Like they take bus, trains, whatever they get. They reach the nearest big cities, tier 2 cities, tier 1 cities. They reach. After that, they try to get some meaningful livelihood opportunities. Some of them do get, but as informal workers, and some of them don't get that. So they have two options: either they go back to agriculture again, which most of them they do, and some of them who don't have that option, they do something on the urban fringes to subside. What we see as people selling vegetables on the roadside, people opening a chai shop on the roadside, people ironing on a board on the corner of the street in a mahalla. So that they do. So these are the people who lost their livelihood first during the COVID, because their livelihood is depending on whether life is continuing or not. So when life stopped, they could not survive in the urban areas, so they had to go back. So that's time Indian middle class realized that so many people are working among us. So these are urban informal workers, and they're self-employed. There is no employer for them. So these self-employed people, this labor codes or labor law has nothing to do with self-employed, and their number is huge. Our half of our labor force is actually self-employed, and they're, you cannot call them entrepreneurs. They are not entrepreneurs. What they do just to survive in this world. So they don't, we cannot glamorize or glorify them that they are doing their business, because there is a tendency to glorify them that they are doing a business on their own. So it's not a business. If you economically look at it, the return that they get would not even qualify for a minimum wage kind of thing. So even if you calculate their own cost, it actually they're running in the running will be lost. If we use the concept of normal profit for them, they would not be earning even normal profit. So that's the problem. Like this self-employed and those who are, and because of such, suppose one person getting a job means 10 other person waiting behind. So in such a kind of a labor market, as per the market demand and supply kind of interaction, there is always a huge pressure on the wage. So suppose a person is working for 300 rupees, there would be another person coming and I am willing to work for 280 rupees, because it is better to get something. And you can see it happening every morning in every city in India. So there is things like called labor chalks or something like that, where people like informal workers, they are sold like slaves kind of a thing.
Yes, pathetic. Yes.
Slave is a strong word. I'm saying that they gather there and they get picked up by the contractors, by the employers.
Kind of yes, that's quite pathetic, and yeah, that's there almost on all the cities,
all the cities. You can miss, and as the day progresses, suppose if it is 8:39, you go there, and those who are remaining still to be picked up, they would be willing to work at a very low wage, even 200, 150, they would be willing to work, because they don't have an option. If they go back empty-handed, they will not have food on that day. Because sad, our employment figures had nothing to do with the return. Like it is, you are asked whether you have got to work in last 7 days or not. You said yes, then you are employed. Whether by doing that work you got 50 rupees or 500 rupees is immaterial. That you have worked is enough, as per our calculation of like how our data collected for employment.
That's indeed shocking. I mean, that's indeed shocking.
And most of the employment growth that has been shown in the PLFS data since 2021, after COVID I'm talking about, are in self-employed and unpaid family work. That shows the crisis that we are having. Our growth, GDP growth rate is I think one of the fastest in world today. Like it's the fastest, even it crossed China. So in terms of GDP growth rate, we are doing fantastic. But in terms of employment generation, we are not doing at all good. And problem is that then how, so the GDP growth rate can be attributed to the productivity rise of those who are working already. So it is a huge productivity increase. But these gains of productivity increase are not coming back to the workers. So in this background also, you have to look at the labor law reform or labor law. So here, the employers, if you broadly, very, I would say, briefly, very in short, if I try to kind of understand the trajectory of labor law reform, it is kind of a withdrawal of the rights of the workers, because the workers' bargaining power has gone down drastically because of this labor market scenario where there is a huge excess supply of labor. That is where the, like, we have to see the whether people keep on saying, I also know that implementation of labor laws is not satisfactory. But if the market forces are operating in other way, it is very difficult to ensure labor rights and labor protection in that environment. That is where the problem lies. So in the new labor code, certain things are being done which is not favoring laborers or workers, or you can, trade unions call them anti-labor policies. However, these are not new. Last 20 years or 25 years, this is actually happening. So labor codes are kind of officializing or kind of formalizing what is already happening in the labor market. So that is why you see that, suppose these laws were kept in abeyance for 5 years, but you don't see not much ground level protest or something that is happening.
I
But
have
in
one.
case of
Yes.
farm laws, it happened, and government had to withdraw the farm laws. But
Hmm.
it did not happen for labor laws. So, question may come that in that case, why you are calling it anti-labor or pro-employer kind of a thing? No, the problem is that the identity of labor has got diluted.
Hmm. Hmm.
So laborers, they don't work like, suppose most of the production in 70s 80s were happening in the factory.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
people gather in the factory, they work, so they have a solidarity in the sense that the identity of labor was quite defined in that
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
But now the production got decentralized, so production is happening in a scattered manner. So workers also became scattered. So in that case, the workers' consolidation or workers' mobilization has become difficult, and workers has lost the belief that they belong to the working class also, because there is a
One
lot of
question.
ambiguity in the employment relation that has happened. So because of this ambiguity in the employment relation, that I am a labor, that sense is no longer there.
I have one question here at this point, Professor Sharkar. So, what are you the thing that you are trying to point out? We also want to know here. See, at one point in time, we saw that to safeguard the labor laws, to safeguard the you know the welfare of the labor of the one of the major ingredients of production in our economics, as we see. It was strikes, and trade unions used to bargain. So in these the kind of that we're listening from you for some time, I wonder that will it change the definition of that quote unquote the word strike, strike, or after or alter the collective bargaining power. It seems like that the point that you are raising now. And of course, another question comes here immediately, that is it going to affect, or is this code going to weaken or rationalize the trade union activities? Because as you say, if laborers are scattered, so and if they start thinking the way that as you have explained, then I think these questions is a larger political economic questions that comes immediately to someone's mind. If you like to respond.
Yes. Suppose in as I said, that Industrial Dispute Act is also known as mother of all labor laws. In that act, I mean, all our like all our laws that defined worker or workman uh, never thought of any distinction between the category of workers as such. So worker means regular permanent workers. So
Hmm.
that the watershed year was 1969, 1970, when you have this Contract Labor Act came. So
Hmm.
that time when the bank were nationalized, then contract labor was employed, and then the government came up with the Contract Labor Act, which was actually not to prevent contract labor but to perpetuate contract labor. So in that laws, there is like your identity as a worker means by default you should be a regular permanent worker.
Hmm.
But that basic structure got I would say diluted since 1970.
Hmm.
So initially it was in the form of contract labor,
Hmm.
then it is form of some contracting, then
Hmm.
it is form of fixed term employment, then it is form of cash employment,
Hmm.
like casual employment, then it is outsourcing. Now at the latest last 1 decade, it is gig and platform workers. So
Hmm.
all this has a kind of a chronology in the sense that initially you had regular permanent workers,
Hmm.
then you have contract workers, then you have outsource gig platform workers. Like this is the how it has happened.
Hmm.
So because the basis of labor law is employment relation. So there has to be employment, there has to be a identifiable employer, and employer has very clear relation with the employee. But if you means dismantle that relation, or if you can mystify that relation, then labor law will not apply. So
Hmm.
one way of this quest for profit maximization and use this cheap labor excess supply that exists in the labor market, that happened through this dilution of the employment relation over the years. And dilution of employment relation also means that trade union as a representative of workers also losing their power. Because if workers' identity is at stake, then who the trade unions are going to kind of now trade unions penetration has gone down over the years. It would be less than 6%, which was at one point of time around 32%. Like penetration in the sense how much of our workers are having trade union membership, one or the other. So that has gone down, but now trade union only exist in the formal sector. So trade union penetration in the informal sector. So I give some numbers. Like suppose our labor force would be around 60 crore. Like our population is 140 crore, but our labor force participation that definition from 15 to 59 years age bracket. Within that, around 56% is our labor force participation rate. So it would come around 60 crore workers. So out of the 60 crore workers, 8% are in the formal sector. So the rest 54 crore, means 6 crore. If I even take giving a benefit of doubt that it is 10%, so 6 crore are in the formal, so-called regular jobs. Rest 54 workers, 50 crore, 54 crore workers are informal workers. But these informal workers are not always working for the informal sector. Most of the informal workers are actually working for the formal sector. Most, not most, majority, quite a significant section of the informal sector. So that means formal sector is having informal workers, and that is happening for last 3 decades. So one sector which has provided lot of employment opportunities, but at the same time all the employment opportunities were in the in the form of informal employment, in the sense that I would like to mention here construction. So construction is something like construction is part of the secondary sector, but comes under non-manufacturing. So starting from late 70s, 80s, 90s, construction of the mainstay of employment creation in India. Most of the after agriculture, one sector where most of the employment got created is construction. And all the construction sector employers are formal sector, whether it is NHI, whether it is AAI, whether it is NBCC, Gammon India, L&T, whoever, all these are big construction companies, and they carry out even in the housing sector also, whether it is Tata's, whether it is Godrej, whether it is other big companies, whatever, DLF, they're all listed in the stock market, all are formal sector employees. But the problem is that 99.99% workers in the construction sectors are informal workers. So construction sector is a classic example of formal sector having informal workers. So we keep on talking about formalizing the informal, but in real life, in Indian labor market, the opposite is happening. We are actually informalizing the formal, and that is like even trade union could not have done much there. But because trade union still thinks that they need to mobilize workers who are in the factories, so they don't find enough workers nowadays. So you even suppose uh, they are opposing these new labor codes. So they are having regular strikes last 5 years, 1 day's kind of a strike. The next strike is coming up very soon, 12th February. But if you see as a neutral observer, as a conscious citizen of the country, or as a kind of academics, you see that these strikes, they claim that these are successful strikes. Yes, they are successful, but if you don't see much kind of impact on the ground level, because their impact is only on the formal sector. This strike impact, suppose maybe some factories in the manufacturing sector, maybe in the service sector, particularly banking, insurance, unions have strong like hold on certain cases. But apart from, if you look at the ground level, the informal sectors, they don't have much, I would say, even understanding what is happening. So they don't participate in such strikes. So trade union has lost to a great extent the being the spokesperson of the entire labor force, because the entire labor force, the categorization and the scattered nature of the labor force, so that identity of labor, that is lost to a large extent. That is why you don't see concerted opposition to the new laws, which happen in case of farm laws, but it is not happening in case of labor laws. And also, In labor laws, what is proposed in new codes, what is proposed is already happening for last 25 years. So workers, even though they are aware of it, they know it's not going to change my life in that way, in the sense that it is happening. And it is happening. Suppose this contractualization or informalization of the labor force happened, even if the laws were in place. Like
Mhm.
ID Act was in place, Contract Labor Act was in place, but employers found ways of informalizing the labor force. So it's
Mhm.
not that having a labor protective labor law is enough. It's like
Mhm.
necessary condition, but not at all sufficient condition. The sufficiency condition, second order condition is not getting satisfied. That is why, like workers are like a bit, they have become pessimistic that anyhow we are not getting any protection. So the new law taking away the protection is not going to matter much for us. So, but what
Yes.
matters much is whether I get a job tomorrow morning. That is what it is like.
I
Yes.
think that on that note, I mean, the way you are narrating things and analyzing, I mean, it's quite what should I say? I'd say disturbing. I mean, to some extent, maybe. I mean,
No, it
but
is distressing.
let me ask you a little more seriously. When a law is enacted, it is enacted to the parliament and all these procedures. But we all know that India has a typical three-tier federal structure, right? And any law, anything, and this fiscal, the federal structure, these laws actually are those, what should I say, the neurons or the spinal cord which connects each of the, participants or stakeholders in this federal structure. So, from a political economy perspective, from this typical perspective of federalism, what is your, how do you see, I mean, that to what extent or how this labor code should alter, if at all, the center-state relations in labor regulation? And on a related note, of course, also what we see that there are many states which has either delayed or resisted this implementation of these particular labor codes. So, what are your views on this? I mean, because we read a lot of things in the newspaper, and there are ample arguments, counter arguments, but for a longer period, and somebody who teaches these things quite often and into the we'd like to hear from you, Professor Sarkar. What are your thoughts on this?
Now, the labor administration is basically based on the principle of tripartism. Tripartism is that it is a kind of a uh, the governing body, so whether it is advisory board or decision making board, that is composed of three parties, that is employers, the association represent employers, trade
Mhm,
unions that represent workers, and
mhm,
state here
mhm,
in case of India being a federal country and labor being in the concurrent list,
mhm.
both central government and state government can make laws on labor. And like so uh, so also it is tripartism and is also based on consensus making, so it's not based on voting. Suppose if there is a body of 18 persons, six each from the three parties, so it's not that something to be decided based on majority vote, because labor administration is based on consensus, so it takes time. You need time to develop consensus among all the parties. But even if there is one kind of opposition to certain proposition, that opposition has to fall in place before that thing is enacted. So you
Just
see
one
lot of
clarification.
collective bargaining and social dialogue happens, and these are part of international standards. Like there are ILO standards which says that labor related issues to be discussed and you need to arise at a consensus. So if we
I have
look
just
at,
one clarification question, Professor Sharkar. When you talk about this, majority voting and consensus, is it applicable for the other laws also? Just for my own clarity, I'm asking
no,
this
no, no,
question.
no, 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 no. Suppose even in parliament, new laws are brought. So
Hmm.
if majority wants it, even the minority is not like that is being like based
Exactly.
on
That's what I
majority
asked.
kind of
That's
a
what,
thing. But the
yeah.
labor administration, suppose all these bodies that is constituted under the different labor laws,
Hmm.
there suppose collective bargaining. It is, suppose there are three unions, two are agreeing, one is not agreeing. You can't take the decision on the basis of 2:1. You have to
Yes.
keep on discussing, and the opposition that is happening, that is coming from one trade union, has to be resolved before you take a final call. So, because we are dealing with human beings, it cannot be based on some majority, like on majority decision kind of. So, it has to be consensus making. So, it takes time, or it is a bit complicated. That is why it's a specialized technical field. So, that is, and it is not that something India does. That it is a international standards that other countries also follow. So all the nomenclature of labor administration that you see, labor commissioner or like deputy labor commissioner, all these are also used worldwide. It's not that. So this is something which like when ILO came into being in 1919. So since then ILO keeps on kind of, and India was a founding member of ILO at that point of time. So it's another matter that India did not ratify many important ILO core conventions, but India still is a very important member of ILO. So these are international standards that has to be followed. Now coming to the center-state dialogue in India, yes, center-state dialogue still happens. Like whenever central government brings some changes in the law, suppose even though the trade union is kind of like saying that they are not being consulted, but if you look neutrally, there has been consultation with the trade union, but the thing is that what the trade union is actually trying to say, that what we conveyed in those meetings were not taken into account while formulating the laws. That's right. But it actually the that those consultation process did happen even for new labor codes. You may say that they're not been sufficient. The consensus was not built. There was some kind of tokenism in the sense that, okay, they were called few times, they were given opportunity of being heard, but actually their positions are not taken into account. That may happen. One problem is that the biggest forum of this center state dialogue is what is known as Indian Labour Conference. It's not an academic conference. Indian Labour Conference is a conference where trade unions, employers association, all the state governments and the central government participate. So earlier it used to happen every alternative year. So the last ILC happened in 2015. After that, no ILC happened. So this entire labor code formulation happened without ILC being convened. So last 10 years, because I was working at that time at National Labor Institute, I could means personally kind of witness the ILC in 2015 August. That, and by default ILC chairperson is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister duly attended that also, and their trade unions very strongly raised their objection to certain labor practices that is going on at that point of time. But unfortunately, no ILC has been convened since 2015. So you can say that this culture or this practice of consensus-based decision-making process in labor administration got a hit because of ILC not happening for last 10 years or so. Another lacuna in the dialogue process is that we do have still we do have a mechanism of center state dialogue in state matters, in labor matters, but there is no such mechanism exist for state to state dialogue, which has become very important because of footloose labor. Suppose labor from Bihar, Odisha, West Bengal coming to different southern states. So West Bengal government has no mechanism to talk with the Kerala government. So all the state governments are talking to the central, but within the intra-state government talk is not happening. So there is no mechanism for that. And bureaucracy works in such a way that it's not that, okay, you are in Chennai, I'm in Kolkata, I will talk to you. If there is some legal profession, only then I'll talk to you. It's not based on good relations or rapport building. So it's have to be based on certain official decorum. So that official mechanism, that official process, that doesn't exist. So we need to create that. Certain states, suppose Odisha has kind of signed a MOU with suppose Kerala or Karnataka, because Odisha government found that a lot of their workers are working in these states, so they need to protect their workers' interest also. So that some of the states are doing it on their own, some creating a kind of a ecosystem of dialogue between the states, but officially speaking, this kind of conversation is not happening officially that much. So there is a problem with that. We need to create where state can talk to another state, because another thing is, even though labor is in the concurrent list, most of the labor, most of the workers fall under the state capacity.
Hmm, 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 hmm.
So if West Bengal has a labor force, suppose 5 crore, then 4.5 crore are under the state. Maybe 50 lakhs are under the center. So state is the main dominant player in terms of labor law implementation or administration. So like then state need to talk to other state, because now people are not limited to a particular state. They are moving from one state to another state. It's
Correct.
not between two states also. Suppose in a lifetime a worker is moving in from 6 7 states minimum.
Hmm,
So we
hmm.
need to create a kind of ecosystem where state can talk to another state. Suppose I got sometimes that kind of a call that one Bengali worker died in Munnar. What to do? How to bring the body, or how to claim compensation, because all the domicile show is Bengal. So this kind of problem is arising nowadays quite a lot. So there are some NGOs and others, they are helping out, but most of the trade unions are still clueless about this. So
I
I
have
mean,
one
this is the
question
problem that we are facing.
here. Just since you talked about certain, I know, and we, of course, we cannot live in isolation. The world is very much connected in all ways. So and these days we talk about the emerging economies, we talk about the sustainable development goals, and of course when you talk about these about the labor codes, the labor laws, uh, any what's your, how do you see, I mean, this India's labor codes with the labor reforms in other emerging countries, or are these labor codes really compatible with the sustainable development goals framework? uh, how do you, what's your thought on this, or how do you see these
Here I
things?
would like to talk about a misconception. There's certain people, like at least in our country, they may think, like common people may think that labor laws talks about labor rights or labor protection or something which is protecting interest of the workers. So it is something that is relevant in a socialistic society or socialistic government, a left government, communist government. But if you look at the how labor law is implemented all over the world,
Hmm.
the strong capitalist countries have very strong labor laws. Suppose, I think presently, if you look at the Scandinavian countries, they are
Correct, that's the
capitalist
reason I asked
countries,
this question.
and they have
Yes,
the strongest labor laws in the
yes.
world. Suppose
Hmm.
countries like Germany, France, they have very stringent labor
Very
laws.
strict labor laws, exactly, yes.
So like it's labor law is not, it is compatible with capitalist system of production. I'm
Hmm.
coming to that why it is compatible. It is not at all
Yeah.
incompatible. But here there is one issue. This is that in those countries, in Europe particularly, in
Hmm.
maybe Australia also, Canada also,
Hmm. Hmm.
US partially,
Hmm.
there is a no distinction between, there is no hierarchy of work. So
Hmm.
all those who work are workers, or those who sell their labor are laborers. So India, we have this hierarchy. We kind of, our labor laws are, we
Hmm.
the quote unquote, there is a concept of labor, there is a concept of worker. So large
Hmm.
section of our population don't identify themselves as a worker or laborer. The
Hmm.
problem is that we see that these laws are for workers, and
Hmm.
workers are a different category at all. But it
Hmm.
is not so in, suppose, in country like Italy, where a CEO of a company thinks that he is a worker or she is a worker. So all labor laws apply to them. So they are concerned about it. Suppose, unfortunately, suppose we think, suppose I'm not excluding myself, I'm not saying that okay, these new labor laws is not going to impact me, because labor laws are not for faculties, not for doctors, not for many like this kind of a profession. Labor law is, in India, labor law is very exclusionary. It is only for, in suppose corporate term, it is called blue collar jobs. But in Europe, it is applicable for all. Those who teaching in university, labor law applies to them also. So all are concerned. So it's like here there is a very clear distinction of hierarchy. Suppose even the concept of labor in India is like there is a kind of a good work, bad work, good labor, bad labor kind of a distinction. Maybe it is coming from our caste system. So in Europe, that doesn't exist. So a person who is sweeping the floor and the person who is the CEO of a company, in terms of labor law, they are treated equal. That equal treatment of dignity of labor or dignity of
Nice,
work
nice,
is
nice.
something which is not in our country, in South Asia particularly, and part of Southeast Asia also. But in capitalist European countries, that is there. That is why their labor law is more stringent. So they are very protective about, suppose you see the France is reducing their work hours, like from 8 hours to 6 hours. Now they said we will work for only 4 hours. Ah,
Mhm.
Italy, every month you have strikes happening. So workers means here workers at all categories, not only so-called quote unquote workers. So that is the distinction. Suppose uh, there is one Tata is making some Tata is having still manufacturing kind of operation in Great Britain. I think I forgetting the name, Koras or something is that the code. So it is a loss making for last 5 years, but they could not shut it down because labor laws there is not allowing it to shut it down. They could have easily shut it down in India.
Of
So,
course.
huh, so they are these like in capitalist society, the interest of the workers are profound. So they will not allow you to, suppose there is no way you can pay less than minimum wages, and minimum wages are quite high. Suppose it is suppose 15 euro per hour kind of a thing. If you compare, even if you adjust for the purchasing power parity, it is quite high. Their minimum wages per hour would be higher than our minimum wages for 8 hours. So this logic that labor law is only happening in socialist or communist countries is a misnomer.
It's very
Labor
interesting.
law is very strong in capitalist country because they're all consider themselves as labor. So they're protecting themselves. It's not a charity they're doing to the working class. That,
Absolutely,
that,
absolutely.
that is where the difference lies to a lot extent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to open the floor if the audience present have any questions here, or people who are viewing it in YouTube or in other social media platforms. You can type your question in the chat box, and of course, and we'll put it to Professor Sarkar to respond to it. And people who are attending it here, please feel free to raise your questions. I open the floor before we close it formally. Yes. If there are questions, please feel free to ask your questions to Professor Sarkar.
And before the question comes, I just want to add one point which I missed is that in India, the labor laws, but even the new labor codes kind of continuing that trend is that we have thresholds in labor laws. Suppose labor law applies if you have 10 or more workers. Labor law apply if you have 20 or more workers. Labor law, certain provisions of the law will apply if you have 100 or more workers. So from the economics point of view, it's like there is a infant industry protection for labor laws. Means if you have less than 10 workers, so no labor laws actually apply for you mostly, apart from the minimum wages. So the logic at that point of time was that small MSME, particularly medium and small scale industries, they are not in a position to financially follow the labor laws. So there is a cost of following labor laws. So they has to be protected. The very basic infant industry protection that we studied in our undergrad classes. But this is something very specific to India. Like 90% of cases in other countries, there is no separate treatment of MSc, kind of a thing. So if suppose occupational safety health kind of a thing, if this is a matter of life and death. So whether you have one worker or 10 worker, the laws applies to that establishment. But in India, that threshold plays a very important role. And what happened because of that is that if you look at the employee register of a private sector bank or any establishment, all very surprisingly stop at 9. So initially I was very kind of perplexed why everything stops at 8 or 9. It doesn't become 10, because if it becomes 10, the labor law applies. So employers, they kind of on paper try to show that actual strength is restricted up to 8, 9, so that labor laws don't apply to those establishments. So that same thing is still being continued. So that is why workers are indifferent about it because this is what happened last 75 years. So like most of these new labor codes, like all the four labor codes, is kind of 80% provisions are what they were. Like it's a kind of a continuation of 80% provisions, maybe 20% change that has happened. And this 20% change is mostly guided by ease of doing business kind of a philosophy. So, and most of these 20% changes is also not new in the sense that this also kind of happened in last 20 years outside the outside UK extra legal kind of a way. So maybe it's like implementation was lax or it was not deliberately done. So it is already happening. Suppose fixed term employment was not there in our laws, but it was happening for last many years. We also know. So there are a lot many fixed term employment that happened. But because of the labor market condition that I talked about earlier, we are not like workers, employees are not in a position to kind of oppose those moves or oppose those steps taken by the employer. So they are not in a position. And certain section of our workforce, I would say, uh, suppose IT, most of the IT employees will is covered under the labor laws, but they themselves don't think that they are covered under the labor laws. So a lot of retrenchment, lot of termination happened in IT industries in mid to 2000, like 2015-16, that period. And but they did not seek protection on the labor laws, which they could have. I have written a paper on this, which is published in EPW. It's about it's happened in Chennai. Sarvanan, he was a middle level manager with not manager, technician, technical engineer with TCS. He lost his job. Then Sarbanan challenged it in the labor court. And in 2021, labor court said that TCS has to take back Sarbanan with all back wages and reinstate. So there are relief that you can get from labor laws, but problem is that most of the engineers in IT sector, they think that labor law is not for them. That's the problem.
Just a curious question here, Professor Sarkar. As you said that these are not applied to the white collar profession. So then people like you, me, all are outside the labor codes. I mean, if tomorrow morning,
Like
God forbid, if
because
something happens,
for
you're
us
helpless.
the logic was that the doctors and teachers are noble professions. So how noble profession can be like treated under labor law? So that was excluded. Even new labor law did not. Apart from gratuity, we are not covered. Only thing that we can go, approach the labor administration if we don't get gratuity, but other things are not covered.
Okay,
If we lose job, there is no coverage. And non-teaching staff and non-medical person in hospitals, they are covered.
that's quite pathetic.
Because
Okay,
it is thought that these doctors and the teachers, they are the, I would say,
no,
the
no, whatever it
guiding.
is. As
But
you said, that particular argument that between the labor and a worker and treating people equally, that's what we always teach in our classes, and we feel like any sensible person will feel like those to implement those philosophies, and that's quite surprising. I mean, since I often read some of your papers and here and there, but I was also not aware of these things in depth, so depth. So, thank you, Professor Sarkar. I think we are almost 7 o'clock, and we have to stop in the interest of the time. This Idea to Impact series, basically, it was. I think we might have to conduct one more session or maybe few more sessions to understand these nitty gritties of these labor codes and labor laws. And one such session is certainly not enough, because this was just an icebreaker. I mean, just an icebreaker or starter kind of thing, if I may say so. But in the interest of time, we follow a format for this Idea to Impact, and here we talk about certain ideas that impacts the society, impact individual, impact the economy at large, or impacted the economy at large. And we do call people who are very much part of this process in some way or the other, organically involved, not simply a critique for that matter. So in that sense, today we made no mistake to request you to be a part of this Idea to Impact session. And trust me, Professor Sarkar, it was extremely enlightening. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a part of this and enlightening all of us. We would continue to discuss these things in future as well. And as I said, this is just a starter. We'd like to know more from you in future. Thank you once again from all our VACP colleagues, all the stakeholders, all the viewers. Thank you once again. Thank you so much, Professor Sad. Thanks to all the participants, all the viewers who are here. Thank you for watching this webinar, or I may say an interaction, which we call the Idea to Impact. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Devdulal, for inviting me and giving this opportunity. The conversation with you was very enriching. Thank you very much.